Another project video for this 2009 E89 series Z4 35i, and in this video we're going to be installing the VRSF downpipes. Now unfortunately I have actually already had these fitted and found that one of the bungs, this one here, the first bung or the top bung in the front pipe, actually is in the wrong position, and so the O2 sensor that comes out of that bung hits on the steering shaft or the heat shield of the steering shaft. And so I was misled by the retailer, by N54 Tuning, who confirmed twice, or by email and verbally, that these pipes will definitely fit a right-hand drive vehicle. It turns out they don't, but I've decided that rather than return them for a credit, I'm going to get a new bung welded in a different position that will be suitable. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, there's less room on a right-hand drive car because of the steering shaft that runs down through there and associated heat shields. The first task is to remove these underbody covers or shields. The front one is held in there by a whole bunch of 8mm screws, and the back one there is held in by mostly 8mm screws and one 10mm screw. So they're the underbody shields from under the engine, the front one, and under the transmission, the back one. The first thing you'll want to do is spray some WD-40 or CRC on these studs here. There's 4 of them. I've already removed the nuts on these, but spray these and let that soak in. We're going to come back to them in a bit. Then you'll want to remove the bracket that's holding the exhaust pipes here. So this bracket here, held in by some E10 bolts, remove that. It'll allow us to push the exhaust back when we need to. And while that CRC or WD-40 is soaking in, you can get in there and remove these retaining nuts. There'll be one there which is already removed, and the other one there almost removed. I found a ratcheting spanner up through here did the job. It's a bit of a tight space, but that's coming off all right. So that's a bracket there that holds these downpipes up to the on a mount up to the back of the transmission case. I'd suggest taking some photos of these connectors and the cables and how everything's routed, so that you can put it all back together later. So this the 2 O2 sensor cables, one has a black wrapping on it, the other one has a grey wrapping. So just note which one goes where, get some photos of how that's all sitting up in there, make it a lot easier to put it back together later, copy that and put it back together. These nuts here now, if you're ready to, you've let your WD-40 soak in a bit, ready to take them off, strongly recommend using a deep socket, so a 12mm deep socket, a 6-point socket too, so you can get a good purchase on them and ensure they come off. So they're going to be tight, might be rusted on, but yeah, use a deep socket. A regular socket doesn't quite go all the way down, and you'll risk rounding them off. So there's some of these 2 lower ones here are really easy to get to. The other 2 less so. So you can actually see up through here. There's even a little gap in the shroud there. See it up through there with an extension bar on there. 3/8 drive straight up through, that's easy. And for this one, you put the socket up through the front area, vertical, and then turn your thing back, and you'll see that it aligns with a slight deformity in the side of the exhaust pipe. Can't come back out through there because it's the socket, but hold it vertical and come back down. That's how you get that top one out. So next, the V-band clamps that hold the downpipe to the turbo. So there's one there in the middle of that picture there. That's the one that holds the front downpipe on, the longer one. So I'll try and get that to focus through there. So for that one, best to use, I find, a 10-inch or 250mm 3/8 drive extension bar, 3/8 ratchet, and I've got these sort of fancy 13mm universal joint sockets, but if you don't have one of them, just a universal joint with a socket on the end of it. And we're going to put that, try and hold the camera here. Now there's a little gap up through here, go up through this hole here and across and onto the nut there. Oh, almost get that right. A bit hard one-handed here with the camera, but I think you get the idea. Get that up on there, and then you've got and turn the ratchet from down here. So that's for that one. Now if it's not quite on the right angle for you, you may need to remove the right hand wheel, right front wheel, and one of these shields, and I'll probably end up taking this off again later. I did take it off last time. So this shield here, which is held in by two Torx bit screws, one here, and mine's a little bit different. I've put that in backwards, but that screw head is normally up on top, which means putting extension bar down through the top with the Torx bit on it. I've actually put a nut on the top there of that one to make it easier to get it out. I can just put a spanner up in there, ratcheting spanner, and take that nut off and then unscrew the screw. So, but yours might be the other way around if it's still original. And then there is this steering rack retaining bolt. Now these are a single use bolt, so if you're going to remove these and take them out, which I probably will, make sure you've already bought spares. So they're available from BMW. I got them from FCP Euro. It was cheaper to buy them in the US and get them freighted to Australia than pay the BMW premium price in Australia. So there's one there and there's one there. I'll give you a bit more detail on them in a little bit. So yeah, with that out, that bolt out, and those other two screws, that heat shield won't actually be removable from the car, but you'll be able to push it aside to get a bit more clearance up through here if you need to get the ratchet or whatever on a bit of a different angle to get to that V-band clamp on the front turbo. And the bolt for the rear V-band, or the V-band on the rear turbo to rear downpipe interface, is the one in the centre of frame there, and that's accessible from the top here. So down through the top there, straight down through there. Now I think it's slightly different angle than what originally was. I've left it in an easier angle for me to get to, but originally I think it was rotated a little bit away from that angle, so had to use a socket with a short extension, a universal joint, and another longer extension to get onto it. But yeah, that one's accessible from the top, so I'll take that one out now. I'll digress briefly here and just go over some of the items that we need to complete this job. So these are some of the items you might want to order. Well, first of all, these are the V-band clamps that we've just been trying to take the bolts out of. So that's what they look like. They're a multi-use clamp, so we don't have to replace them, but I just decided I'd rather have them on hand since I'd been going in and out with them in the past when I was trying to fit these downpipes before. So I just thought they might weaken through here the number of times that I've had them in and out. So I just thought I might put new ones in. But anyway, you can see what they're, for the sake of getting them out, the nut on this side is captive, so you don't need to get a spanner on that side. You're just trying to take the bolt out from that side. And once you get the bolt out, they'll still be wedged shut like that. We're then going to knock each side, that side with the captive nut and this side, to loosen that clamp and spread them apart to get them off. There's the part number. So I got these from FCP Euro. They're obviously genuine BMW items. There's the part number if you want it, and they do come with the bolt. I wasn't sure. I ordered the bolt separately. There they are there, but you don't need to order them separately. They come with it. Other items, we talked briefly about those single-use bolts on the steering rack. So there's two of them. I've already had both out, and I didn't have these new ones to put in, so I put the old ones back in. But yeah, they are a single-use bolt, and the way they're tensioned up did make me a bit nervous driving the car around with those old bolts in. So this part number is for quantity 1, so you need to order 2 of them if you're going to take those 2 bolts out of the steering rack. and they're the associated nuts. Once again, you need to order 2 of the relevant part number. The other items I've got, these are the turbo to downpipe gasket. So apparently they're a single-use gasket. I did reuse them when I put the original downpipes back in after fiddling around with these downpipes before, and I didn't have any leaks, so they were okay, but I didn't want to go through all this again and then find that I did have leaks, so I did order these ones. These are the genuine ones. They came from FCP Euro. They were just loose like this in the box, a bit sloppy of FCP Euro, because they've actually got pretty damaged in transit. Type of material they are doesn't surprise me. These aftermarket Erling brand ones were a lot cheaper, and they're individually wrapped. Still splitting a bit, but I guess that's the way they're made or the type of material, but I'd probably just stick with those cheaper aftermarket ones, and that's probably what I'll be fitting. The other item is these gaskets and bolts for the downpipe to exhaust interface. So these bolts and gaskets came with the downpipe kit from VRSF. I did realise I had to add a few extra stainless steel washers, but yeah, they come with the downpipes. So I've got this screwdriver here that's been modified with a bend in the end of it. Comes in handy for this job. You can find other ways of doing it, but let's try and zoom in there and show you what I'm up to. So there's the V-band clamp down there. Got the bolt out of it, so I'm putting this screwdriver in. I pull up to loosen the top part of the V-band clamp, so that's all loose now. Push against the bottom part, and then I'm going to whack down the top of this screwdriver here just to break the bottom part of the V-band clamp away. So I'll do that once I put the camera down. So I didn't quite have enough length on that screwdriver to punch down the top of it to break the bottom part of the V-band clamp away. So I'm using this longer pry bar here. Put that down there. Put it on just sit on the top of the bottom clamp and whack down on the screwdriver with this pry bar, and that broke the bottom part of the V-band clamp away. So both parts are loose. The V-band clamp's all loose now. Once you get that bolt out, there's nothing holding it on but a bit of friction. So there's O2 sensors screwed into the downpipes. So we saw earlier there's 2 at the back, one on each downpipe. But there's 2 at the top or front end of each downpipe. So there's a grey and a black cable here, and they go down to the sensors. I can just sort of see the edge of one through the centre of frame there. I can't really get the camera in to show you. I did attempt to remove these using a special tool, and I can't get them out. I tried before with several tools and couldn't find anything that worked. I even went and bought this other one from FCP Euro, which seems like a very high quality tool, but it still doesn't help me get them out. So it's hard enough getting the tool over the sensor, let alone then trying to find a way of connecting up a ratchet or something to undo them. So I do know that the downpipes will come out with the sensors on them. I've had them out before. So we're going to do that procedure, which I think is how most people do it anyway. So these cables here from the O2 sensors go around the other side of the vanity cover and plug in about here, somewhere under there. So next step will be to remove the vanity cover. 4 5mm socket head cap screws, 1, 2, 3, and another one down there, 4. So that'll be the next step, to take that off and disconnect the O2 sensors. So these O2 sensors use colour coding on the sheath. So there's 2 O2 sensors and 2 pipes. So there's a total of 4 sensors, 2 in the front pipe and 2 in the back pipe. So the front pipe is serving, well, front of the car is serving cylinders 1, 2, 3. So that's the first turbo at this end of the motor, and the second turbo cylinders 4, 5, 6. And so the front pipe uses a black sheathed cable, and the rear pipe uses grey sheath cable. So This one with the black will go to the front pipe, the grey will go to the rear pipe, and that's the same colour coding that's used at the other end on the bottom O2 sensors that we saw earlier. So make a note of that, and also note, if you need to, take photos of the routing of those cables, because we're about to pull them out. So they go around the back of the engine there, so I like to use my phone and take lots of photos so I can put it all back neatly afterwards, and copy the routing. So that's the grey cable there where it plugs in. We're going to disconnect that and pull all that cable through, and there's the black one. We're going to disconnect that and pull it all through. Removing these plugs, so you've got two little latches, one on this top side and one there that are locking them in. I roll it, so front of the car here. So I roll it to the left and get it off of that right clip, and then push across to the right and then lift them up, and they're out. Then you can find the bit that you hang on to. I think it's that bit there underneath. It's hard with one hand. Oh, there we go. Now they're out. So that's that's for the front black, the front pipe, and do the same on this one. Now the cables are all removed from all their clips around the top of the engine there, and free all the way down to the O2 sensors. So it's ready to go. I think we're pretty much finished for the moment up top. There's the V-band clamp for the back pipe, and taking the bolt out from below here, but get a screwdriver in there. So that's those two halves of that clamp are clamped together even with the bolt removed. So I've got a screwdriver in from down on a different angle here up through there, and now I just give that end of that screwdriver a sharp whack and at least release one side of that V-band clamp. Now both halves of that V-band clamp are loose, which is what we want. The V-band clamp for the front pipe, so that's a front turbo the screwdriver's pointing at. That's the V-band clamp. Just sort of use a screwdriver to really spread them apart and try and sort of get it off of the interface between the downpipe and the turbo. Then we want to remove all this cabling from its clips, so we're leaving them connected for the moment, but remove them out of the clips. Hopefully you took a photo of that before you did, so you got something as a reference. Same with these, pull these out. There's one up the top there. Don't yank on the cable to get that out, just put a screwdriver up behind it and push it out. We haven't still left the O2 sensors screwed in down here for the moment. The rear sensor on the front pipe, this one here, if you can get a spanner on it and crack it just to loosen it, go ahead. Then grab hold of the exhaust pipes and sort of pull them back so they're clear, and then use a pinch bar to get up onto that area there. Now I've used the pinch bar to push the bracket back and just drop it down a bit. Still connected here, but well, I've got one hand filming, I'm not going to do it. Oh, hang on, I might be able to hold it by doing that. Pull down on that a bit. So that's going to come away. There we go. And now I've just got to take it out from up in there. So where that V-band clamp was that I pulled out of the way, it's going to wiggle everything and get this downpipe out of the car. Now I've got the 22mm spanner still in my pocket, and as I bring it down and out, as I get in a position to get this O2 sensor out, I'm going to do that. So now with that dropped down a little bit, if that makes it easier for you to get that O2 sensor loosened at least, go ahead now. Otherwise there'll be another opportunity in a little bit. Using the pry bar up through here to wiggle the V-band clamp and sort of pulling down on the whole downpipe, managed to get it to drop right away now. So that O2 sensor is definitely easy now to get hold of. Support the pipe with your hand, and you can definitely crack that and loosen it off. Still don't need to take it all the way out just yet. It's now dropped, still stuck up in there. Remember, there's an O2 sensor at the other end of that pipe, and you don't want to bend or damage that. So I haven't forced anything yet, but it's naturally just dropped down sort of to this point, just with a bit of wiggling. So now I can unscrew this sensor. Now it's optional whether you want to disconnect it at the connector. These connectors, you've got to get something in on two sides of them. Two fine flat blade screwdrivers or something like that to get that plug apart. Yeah, I'm going to probably take the plug apart, but if you don't want to, you can sort of rotate this sensor around, try and turn the cabling around to get that sensor out. It's about, you'll see when I get it out, but I think it's about six turns or 5 turns or something to remove it. So very carefully wedged two little flat screwdrivers in under each side, and then pulled the plug apart. It's almost a two-person job to do it. In hindsight, probably should have done that before I pulled all the downpipe down, but now with that and the downpipe loose, or the O2 sensor loose, can now unwind and remove that O2 sensor. So remembering that's the black cabled O2 sensor or black sheath, and that's on the front downpipe. And there it is out, and if you count the number of threads there, it's more like 4.5 turns to remove them. So it is possible to do it without disconnecting, carefully sort of twisting all of the length of the wire, but anyway, about 4 turns to remove it. So this downpipe, the O2 sensor is just hooked on behind the steering shaft there in the centre of frame. So that's this front downpipe. So now it's a matter of removing it. There's a way of wiggling it. You do not need to force it. So I can't remember which way you rotate or turn it, but I did find that it does come out actually relatively easy. It's a bit like trying to pick a lock. Rotate it a little bit one way, twist it, turn it, tilt it, then rotate it the other way. And it does end up coming out relatively easy. So I've got it out. Now it comes out, the end part comes out actually almost facing the front of the car, the back end of it, but yeah, it's a bit funny the way it twists out. Now, I did get it out. I haven't yet needed to take that steering rack bolt out there or on the other side. I do need to replace them because I've had them out before, as I said earlier. This whole job, probably that task there would have been a lot easier if they had been out and you just push the steering rack forward, and I might still do that when I go to put it all back together. So this heat shield I mentioned earlier is the one that was held in by 2 Torx bit screws and also the bolt. You can see the top of it there under my finger. That's the top of this main bolt that holds the steering rack in. So if you have taken those all apart and that's all loose, I think this job would have been a bit easier to get it out with the O2 sensor on there. The other one is this heat shield up here, and that's held in by I think it's a 10mm bolt. 10mm bolt there, and there's also a bolt that comes from above. I think it's also a 10mm bolt. And then I think from memory, I did have it out last time, that heat shield comes out all together from the top, and that would also give a bit more clearance. So if you're having trouble wiggling and getting that out, perhaps try loosening the steering rack or taking the steering rack bolts out, and or this heat shield here. To get a bit more clearance, and I might still have to take them out yet to get the other one or the new one in. So now downpipes out. There's the rear sensor we removed earlier, both with black sheath cables. This is the front pipe. Now I'm going to take the O2 sensor out. So I've just cracked it loose using my new tool, just so at least I get some value out of the $25 or whatever I spent on that. But to be honest, I still probably would have preferred to do it just with an open end 22mm or 7/8 spanner. But now with that loose, we can unwind it and remove it. Now I'm going to unplug the rear O2 sensor off of the rear pipe. So I've just found these seal picks go well just to hold the 2 sides open. So I can't do it while I'm holding the camera, but with that I'll just hold the top part of the plug and the bottom part, and that'll pull apart. Plug's disconnected, so now a 22mm spanner, and I've already cracked it, but loosen off that O2 sensor if you need to, or if you can, unwind it and remove it. I'm going to remove this bracket here. So it's an E18 socket. I've already now removed this bolt here. And the top one there's this big aluminium lump in the way, so I had to use a short extension. It's like a 3/4 inch 3/8 drive extension, and I can get that up there around that aluminium block. I can get it in. There we go. And on a long handled 3/8 drive ratchet, and undo that one. Now there's the bracket removed. Now first of all, I added this bit of insertion rubber on top of it when I put it back in last time, and the reason was I'd put in the VRSF silicon turbo inlet hoses, and up there, that one up there, and it was rubbing on this bracket, so I didn't want it to damage the silicon hose. I knew I was coming back to it, so I just put that bit of insertion rubber on there, and now I can remove it if I hold the camera in one spot, so that should just push off. There we go. Yours won't have that on there. Now these bolts here are aluminium, and they've got the blue paint on the end, which I think for BMW means that they're once again a single-use bolt. So they connect, well, they hold this bracket on, but they ultimately are connecting the engine block to the transmission bell housing. So there's a whole series of them around. I'm not touching any of the others, so I'm okay with it. I mean, I'm not going to 600 horsepower or anything, so I feel comfortable to reuse these bolts, but that might be an option for you if you want to order new bolts to replace these. I've reached up with my hand through here and found that V-band clamp on this downpipe, and just spread it apart with my fingers and tried to twist it off. We've got that bracket out of the way, so I think all that's really holding it is this. So if I pull back on that now, I should be able to drop this downpipe down. So on the left behind the LED strip light there is the front turbo outlet, and on the right is the rear turbo outlet. So this pipe's out now. Now it took me, I don't know, 10 minutes of fiddling around. So I tried first of all with this V-band clamp to bring the, I don't know, we'll call them the two tabs, the open part of the V-band clamp, rotate it around towards the bottom and spread it apart and try and push it over onto the turbo side, and everything got really badly jammed up, and so I had to use a screwdriver, a little angle on the end of it. That one there, that screwdriver there, really helpful to realign it, get the V-band clamp back on in position, and then I rotated the V-band clamp so that the split in it was towards the top, and then just held it open and tried to move it towards the downpipe side to release it onto the downpipe side like that, and it came straight out. Be aware you've still got your O2 sensor in, but this one is, comes out pretty easy. You just got to be careful not to damage that on the way out. But that's that rear downpipe out now. And next step, remove the O2 sensor from this one. All the parts are out, so the two downpipes, V-band clamps, and 4 O2 sensors, 2 with grey cables, 2 with black cables. We'll come back and have a look up in here. I've got a little LED strip light up there. So that gasket around the outside of the turbo there, that's the one that they say is a single use that I've reused and didn't get any leaks. And looking at this one on the front turbo, it's in very sound condition. I'm tempted not to replace it. The one on the other side, on the rear turbo, try and focus on it, but right at the top, it's got a bit degraded, probably with me pulling this thing in and out. So if I'm going to attempt to replace one, it'll probably be that one. And just for interest, there's the little wastegate, and that's a little bit, I believe, that starts rattling if you have a wastegate rattle issue. This car only has about 35 or 45,000 kilometres on it, so very low mileage, and so I think that little bit of movement there is quite acceptable. The old exhaust gasket seal there in the turbo, I've taken it out with a seal pick, and I'm going to try fitting one of these Erling ones. So the new Erling seal went in all right. I lined it up the top side first and started sort of feeding that into its track, and then at the bottom I had to use this seal pick just to, you know, try and compress it a bit sideways to get it in. Yeah, I don't know. I really wonder whether it's worth risking that. This one, you know, it's got sort of splits around it. Those original genuine BMW ones that came from FCP Euro, I really doubt whether they're going to work in there. They're too badly damaged in transit. So, but anyway, I've replaced that one. I'll probably leave the front one alone. This bracket won't be going back in. This supported the original downpipe, so that won't be going back in. But we do need to put the bolts back in that went through this. So here is one of them. They're an aluminium bolt. The weight of them tells the story, but you can also check with a magnet. At least mine are. I have read that, well, these are a single-use bolt first of all, and I don't have a replacement, so I'll be reusing them and just tightening them up by feel, and hopefully I won't strip any in there. Apparently they're superseded now by a steel bolt, so perhaps consider ordering some of those from FCP Euro or from the dealer at the time. So they're going back up in here, and I've already put one back in. Before I put them in, I poked a screwdriver in the hole and with a little 90-degree bend in the end of the screwdriver, so I could feel where the thread ends to make sure that the holes are deep enough for these long threads, since we're getting rid of effectively the bracket which acted as a spacer. So yeah, I found that these holes here into the block are deep enough, and I'll just tighten them up by feel. Now that's the engine block. There's this bracket here which holds a heat shield on, so it's front turbo, rear turbo. There's a bolt here that I just remember that I had to change last time I tried to fit these. So that was one of these style probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 these little ones here. The heads on it are too big and it hit on the pipe, so I swapped it for a stainless steel socket head. It's a button socket head screw, whatever they're called. So that uses an Allen key, and it has a much lower profile so the pipe can clear it. So I found that to fit this, at least well, my right-hand drive car, had to swap that bolt out for that one. So I've already had these in the car before, and these top bungs are in a similar sort of orientation and position. But these lower bungs are in a very different position. So on the new downpipe there, that one's almost pointing up at that point, and with this pipe on a similar angle, this one's way down here. So it's sort of like the equivalent of having it here on this pipe. I'm hoping it'll be all right and that this bung isn't a problem. I have had it fitted, and I know there wasn't a clearance issue or anything with that position, and I'm pretty sure the cable was long enough and everything else. But yeah, it is in quite a different position. Using some silver grade anti-seize, or never sneeze as we call it in Australia. Put a bit on the threads. Do not get any on the sensor itself, on the sensing end of that, just on the threads, a little bit on there. And we're now going to refit the O2 sensors to this pipe here, or at least get them ready to fit. So this one here is the grey cable, and that goes onto this rear pipe, the rear position of the rear pipe, that one. So that one's ready to go in later. And the front one, which is this cable here, grey lead, and I'll put some never sneeze on that one and actually install that one and do it up tight. Another US company has let me down, so FCP Euro this time, been pretty good up till now, but these are the V-band clamps that I got from them that they claim fit a 2009 Z4. Turns out they don't, and when I research it, this part number is for an N55 engine, and of course mine has the N54 engine. So I've spent about an hour trying to fit them, and although they look very similar, I've now worked out they're a different thickness of metal, and so I have to put the original ones back in. So the rear turbo downpipe, which was the last out, is now the first back in. So the O2 sensor, grey cable, top one screwed in. It's got the long grey cable, and that's screwed in, tightened up. V-band clamp is, I'm just going to rest that on there while I put it in. And struggled a bit with trying to put the V-band clamp on while attached to the down pipe side, but I'm going to try this now. So got the V-band clamp now around the turbo side with the opening there on the left, and note the position of the captive nut on that side, on the down side. That's the rear turbo pipe, got the V-band clamp on, but I'm trying to rotate it around, but it's hitting on this wastegate actuator rod, so that comes back over here. So I need to somehow reach up, grab hold of that, or use something to push that back so I can rotate that clamp around. So we don't want that impacting or interfering that V-band clamp with that actuator rod, but I need the captive nut there that's visible in the center of that shot to rotate around and down to the left side of the actuator. I was having a little bit of trouble with that V-band clamp again. I had it on and it slipped off. This is for the rear pipe, and so I've removed this heat shield. So there's one bolt that comes through from underneath and one bolt from top. So I've removed that heat shield. You see the knuckle in the steering shaft there now. It's given me a bit more room there, but now I'm having a little bit of trouble that the top part of the band is catching on the turbo actuator. So I'm just going to have to fiddle around with that a bit more. Some advice on how to get this clamp in position and in place on that rear downpipe to turbo interface. So put it on the turbo side, or stretch the clamp apart as far as you can. Put on the turbo side and end up with the actuator where my finger is there. So there's an actuator on the turbo. Have it so that it's coming between the top and bottom tabs of the clamp while you get the downpipe in place. And then once you're ready and it's all in place, then what I did was got this bolt started. This is the longer one, so I got that in, just got it started a bit, and tighten up, I don't know, about 10 mil in on that thread, and then I pushed the actuator back just by hand. It's not that hard, and I rotated the clamp around, then turned it down and away so that the actuator now was just sitting above. And then I tightened this bolt down until the top and bottom parts of the clamp were about 1/2 inch apart. Then I took this bolt out and put the original bolt with a washer on it back in. So in the center of frame, just sort of where my finger is pointing, above my finger is a small E8 or whatever it is bolt. That was the same as what was in the other side here in the center of frame, and I've replaced it with that socket button head cap screw, stainless steel. And you can see now the downpipe in there. I haven't done the bolt up on the V clamp yet, but you can see there's barely maybe 2 millimeters of clearance there, and that's why I had to change that out. Fit the rear O2 sensor to the rear pipe. Just these bolts are just loose, and I haven't tightened the V-band clamp up yet. Just wanted to make sure we can get all this in. So the O2 sensor in there, haven't tightened that up yet. I'll just use a short 22 mil open end spanner to do that. But there's the O2 sensor. It's in a different position, so the bung now is way up over there. It used to be about here. That means the cable length becomes a bit of an issue, and also the position of this heat shielding. So there was a cable tie on the grey shielding to hold that piece of that heat shielding up against the sensor. I cut the cable tie and slid that heat shielding along now so it can end up in that position, which is where it's going to serve a better function, and just loosely connected it into the plug. Haven't clipped it right in yet. So that's going to be how it's going to run. It's a bit tighter than before, but yeah, I think this will work. I might have to cable tie this off against the other one that's going to clip in up there. So yeah, that sensor will work. I did also consider using the O2 sensor with the black cable, which is normally, well, that's off the front downpipe. Considered using it In fact, I even cut the cable tie that's holding that extra heat shielding in place and did try it in there. It is a much better fit lengthwise. The only problem, and I researched it and found the sensors, from everything I could find, the sensors are identical. All I could see the difference was the length of the cable and the colour of that sheath, you know, black versus grey. As it turns out, there is another difference, and that is the keyway of the connectors. So although the wiring pins are in the same position, there's a different key structure to this. I've connected the O2 sensor back in, put a cable tie up here just to help just give that tiny bit of slack. There's really not much slack left over. But that at least puts the heat shield part above the above the other downpipe. I've put the sensor in and tried fitting it, and worked out that I need to move the bung, or get that bung taken out, covered up, and a new bung put in, moved in the direction of the arrow, and about that far over, about 5 or 6 millimeters from the existing position, and that will resolve the issue. The other thing is we might change the angle of the bung slightly, so the top of it tilts a bit more to the left of the frame there. So that's the front O2 sensor bung that's been sort of temporarily modified. What we did is took it to an exhaust place and got them to, with the original bung, just cut around all the weld, or most of the weld, around about 90% of it off, and leave a bit of weld on the side where we want to pivot it or hinge it. So if we get the camera in, that's that side there where that black line sort of comes out from. And but they've cut all the other weld out around, and then tilted the whole bung over to move this across. So but this bung used to come out on an angle. This bung used to come out on an angle, sort of in the direction of my finger there. So now it's just pushed across, and that's created a gap in here underneath in the bung. So they've just put a bit of stainless steel in there for the moment, tack welded it in. Still in the exhaust flow, but they'll now take it back and just get them to modify it just a tweak in the direction of that pink arrow, and then go ahead and weld it all up. A bit hard to hold the camera in there. The bottom of frame is the heat shield on the steering shaft. There's the O2 sensor sort of hidden, sort of the one that's mostly hidden is the other one, but the one we've been working on is the one that's more exposed, the bit of pink stripe on it. And yeah, you can see how far we've moved it. Those pink stripes originally hitting where the pink stripe is on the heat shield. And the bolt on the left is the bolt head on the left is the V-band clamp. And yeah, I'd like to get a little bit further away from that, so we'll probably try and move it a few more millimeters in the direction of the pink stripe on top of the sensor. But otherwise, good clearance, and that's with the steering rack pushed back into position and a bolt through it, and the heat shield in position and everything else. So that's what we should end up with. This is the front O2 pipe, and there was this engine mount bolt up through a hole here, but it was hitting on the pipe, so I'm gonna have to get something else to put in there, something with a smaller head on it, because there's less clearance now in there with the pipe. But everything's sort of just try and bring it back into rough alignment back here, and that O2 sensor position sorted. And remove the pipe now and go and get that welded up. So this engine mount bracket bolt was, the head of it is hitting on the front downpipe when I try and install it. So the problem is that it's too sort of thick or fat through there. I need something a bit smaller. I considered, it's a bit of captive washer, considered cutting that off, which would have given me a couple of mil, but I want a bit more than that. And so I've removed it. It's an M12, I think. It's an M12 bolt, about 40 millimeters of thread on it. It's got a coarser thread than normal. I think it's a 1.75 millimeter thread. so you won't get it from your regular hardware store. You need to go to a fastener specialist, but this is what I've got to replace it. So this is a button head cap screw in M12 by 40 with that 1.75mm or whatever it is thread, and in high tensile. So this original bolt, unlike the other ones, these ones here are aluminium, but and I think the replacement for them is steel now from BMW, but these ones were high tensile steel to start with, so replacing it with a high tensile. And from all my research, I found the torque spec is about 48 foot-pounds, so I've put it in and torqued it up to 48 foot-pounds, which felt about right. And putting on that angle and holding him on the same position there, or face, you see the extra clearance that's been picked up. Happy not to have a washer on it. The bearing area, the surface area under that, is actually probably a bit bigger than the washer anyway, so should be fine. I've got the downpipe back after they'd modified that bung, the position of it, so they've changed the angle of it there. And yeah, to be honest, that's, yeah, I hope that, I mean, the welding I think will be secure, but yeah, pretty average quality welding. And yeah, I went to put my O2 sensor back in, and I see that that they've actually, when they must have been cutting the old bung off, they'd left the O2 sensor in and have actually cut through the O2 sensor a little bit there. So hopefully it'll be all right. The shop is shut today, but yeah, turns out that common sense isn't so common. Ready for the front downpipe to go back in. So the bracket here on the steering shaft is in place but loose, and this bracket here is loose. That needs to be loose to get it in. New seal on the turbo outlet. I probably realised after taking the old one out, I really think you probably could reuse the old ones. And I'm reusing the original V-band clamp. Just note the position of the captive nut on the left side, opening on the right, and that's not the end position it'll end up in, but that's the best position with the narrowest part of the V-band clamp up at about 10 o'clock or 11 p.m. there, if we were treating that like a clock. So I'll feed the downpipe through, and then that V-band clamp will rotate around clockwise a bit to get the bolt in. Now, I'm not going to be able to film this process. I need both hands for the downpipe, but that's the angle you start off at to feed it back in. So it goes back in through there, and I've got the O2 sensor on and tightened up. And then as I feed it in, I rotate the whole downpipe anti-clockwise, and that gets the O2 sensor up and around that heat shield on the steering shaft. Yeah, downpipe is almost all the way in there. It is in there. It's just sort of resting at the moment on all the twists and bends in it, but it's basically in there. But before I go any further, I have to put this O2 sensor in. So I realised I couldn't put this in any earlier because of the way I had to rotate and twist this pipe, I think. So, but now before I lift it up that last little bit, I'll put this O2 sensor in the rear and tighten it down. So to help hold it in place at the turbo interface, come back down under here and pull these forward towards the front of the car, and just nip these up a bit, just to close the gap in here. I've still got a bit of a gap up in there, but do that, nip that clamp up, and then back here I can put a bolt through just to align the hole, and then some bit of rubber spacer or something, another screwdriver or something in there, just to wedge these two faces apart, and that will help me to close the gap up in there and hold it closed while I get the V-band clamp in place. So I'm using my special long bolt just to get it started. So I've come up through this hole, where is it? There. There's the long extension there with my 13mm socket, and I've got a socket with a uni joint built into it. You can put it that goes up through that hole, and might be able to get a glimpse of it through here. No, Oh, there it is, just on the edge of the frame there. So I put a bit of paper towel, that's the in the socket, just to hold the bolt in there as I slid it up through. And yeah, that's the long one. So I've just done it up about that far just to pinch it a little bit shut. Now I'll unwind that bolt and put the original bolt back in with the washer on it. And now I'm ready to put the original bolt back in the V-band clamp. Now I've just got it pinched a little bit. So just using a 3/8 drive on a 10-inch extension. I've got a 13mm socket with a built-in universal joint, a bit of paper towel shoved in there to hold the bolt in place so it doesn't fall out, and ready to go through. If you don't have one of those special uni joints built into a socket, just use a separate uni joint or try without. It's actually pretty close to straight through anyway. Now there's the bolt through the V-band clamp. It's not done up completely tight yet. I've only done up enough that I can still sort of twist this, rotate this a little bit. But I've come back at the back here now. So both V-band clamps are on. I've backed this off, so this is all loose in here. And now I've moved up here, put the bolts through. They're only done up finger tight at the moment. So what I need to do is make sure that is loose because you're going to want to pull these up. They might not be pulling up. If you tighten that up and these don't pull up evenly, you'll end up with issues. So just making sure now the pipes are in the right position. The main thing of getting these bolts through and just finger tight is making sure they're in alignment, because you can sort of rotate the downpipes a little bit and to fix any alignment issues here. But we've done that, and just to highlight, that's that button head cap screw up in there, and you can now see why we needed it. And I'm glad I didn't even put a washer on it. There's barely 2mm of clearance there, so it definitely needed to be changed. Other than that, all done just down here for the moment, I think. So now I'll go and, or actually tighten up the V-band clamp, this front one, this one that, well, hard to get to, hard to see through there. It's easy to actually get to up through here. But so I'll tighten that one up, and then I'll lower the car, tighten the other one up, and once they're nice and tight, then I'll come down here and tighten these up, and then finish by tightening those up. So the V-band clamp on the front downpipe, and I've tightened that up. That felt about right, so it's just about close that V-band clamp. There's about 1mm of clearance in there. The other V-band clamp I got from the top, and that's tightened up to a similar position of the one I just showed you. Now I've put the bolt and the nut back on that heat shield that's on the steering shaft, but also so V-band clamps tight. Then I've tightened these up, so these were done up now as tight as they need to be, and then I've come back and tightened these up all in that order. So I've finished by tightening that, and everything's sturdy now. There's clearance, so there's just a little bit of clearance there. Oh, probably more than enough, 3 or 4mm there. Clearance on that button head screw. There's clearance up in there where I put that other button head screw in, and so pretty happy with the way that's looking so far. Now actually just while we're there, I'll try and show you that O2 sensor. This is probably actually the best angle to get to see what's going on. So it's a little bit deceiving because that plate, that heat shield angles away where that O2 sensor is, so it's actually a bit further, a bit of an optical illusion. It's a bit further than what it looks there. Try and get it up on that angle, it might be a bit better. The cable from it is touching on the heat shield. I have checked, and this is a car with very low mileage, only about 45,000 Ks, and so there's very little movement in the engine mounts here, and so yeah, I don't think I'm going to have any issue with that. So that's where that one that got welded back on, that one up in there, that's how that ended up. Back here, actually did this a bit earlier but forgot to tell you, so if you haven't done it, you can do it now. So I put this O2 sensor cabling or the heat shield in position and routed it through, put a cable tie on there, but that was after I'd actually connected it all up. So this downpipe has the O2 sensor with the grey cable like it originally did, and this O2 pipe, which is actually the front one, has the black O2 sensor cable, and it just got routed up through there, clipped into its original position and routed like that. So very happy with the way that ended up, but there really isn't much excess cable there. They're both pulled pretty tight. Putting this shield here back on, so just putting those through loose for the moment while I tighten up this bolt here. So I got my new steering rack bolts, so these are those single-use ones. By the way, these are steel, at least the ones in my car were. So I know those engine to bell housing bolts were alloy, but these ones are steel, and I'm presuming they've always been steel. And these are the new nuts with a captive washer. And if you do look at them, you see the hole looks sort of oval shaped there. That's how they're supposed to be. So if you get them, it's not a defect. That's how they're supposed to be. So this is the steering rack bolt on the left hand side, passenger side for right hand drive, driver's side for left hand drive. The nut that's sitting there jumping up and down, well, that's now in place, well, on the bolt that it should be on. So at the back here you can get visibility to things, so this is the easiest way to sort of put your head in this vantage point to see what's going on. And what I've done to get this on is, first of all, started at the bottom, and with the bolt out I got everything in alignment so the bolt would go straight up through the hole. Once the hole of the steering rack is in line with the hole of the bracket, then I took the bolt out. I put a nut, and I've got another one, the old one here. I put it in a ring spanner, and then you, if I can hold that there, you slide it up this ramp, and the other nut's in the way, but and you slide it across, looking then from underneath with the bolt out, and you watch yourself slide it across the hole. And it's inside the ring spanner there. Slide it across the hole, looking from underneath, get it in alignment, then slide the bolt up from the bottom, and holding the spanner up through here with your right hand, and the bolt head with your left hand, and get it started. Not much to it, it's quite easy, but other than that, it's very difficult to get your hand in there or to see what's going on. So this is the easiest way to do it. So I've tightened up those steering rack bolts, but only just firm with a ratchet. I haven't torqued them yet, because if I have to take something off, I don't want to have to buy new bolts again. So you do need to put them in, because you don't want to start the car up with them loose or removed, or you might have issues with your steering alignment. So I've done them up just firm, and just to remind myself not to drive the car until I do it, I took one of the old captive nuts and zip tied it to a key, or the key for the car, so that will remind me not to drive off without tensioning those up. So just to, now I've also come back up the top here, I've routed all the cables, the O2 sensor cabling. So they're all routed back around and plugged into their respective connectors. Yeah, refer back to your original photos and the start of the video. And just to now show you what sort of clearance I've ended up with, try and zoom in and get the camera down there. Okay, so there's a bit of pink paint on the heat shield there, and some on the sensor, O2 sensor. That's where it was hitting. So I've gained there's about 10 millimeters of clearance there now, and the cable is just gently resting up against the heat shield. It's hard to see, but it's the V-bolt clamp and bolt is actually about 15 millimeters or 20 millimeters below it, so it looks like it sort of might be getting close to it, but it's still quite away from that. So I'm pretty confident that'll be okay, and even as the motor twists a bit under torque, it shouldn't cause any damage. So that's the O2 sensor, how it's ended up. Probably could have gone a little bit more, would have been nice, but anyway, I'm pretty happy with how that's ended up. Now the car is ready to run. So I'm going to start it up and give it a run and see if I've got any exhaust leaks. I've had it running for a few minutes. There's the typical noisy sort of ticking coming from the top of the engine there without the vanity cover on. That's normal. It's been running a few minutes. It's pretty much stopped now, but there was a bit of smoke coming out from the clamps where the V-band clamps are and the O2 sensors. And that would just be the Never-Seez paste that I put on the sensors, and probably also the new turbo to downpipe seals, probably just letting off a bit of steam. So nothing now, and there's no real exhaust leaks. I've given it a few revs, nothing to worry about. It all seems pretty good. Interestingly, I haven't updated the tune on the MHD yet to include the aftermarket downpipes, but I don't have any fault codes coming up on the dash yet, which I was sort of expecting there to be, but maybe the MHD unit, which is down in here, maybe that's already clearing them. I'm not sure, but anyway, I won't drive it without upgrading the tune to include the downpipes. So now I'll turn it off and proceed to put all the covers back on the top of the engine and underneath, and get it off the hoist. And no leaks down here from any of the seals or joints. Everything looks good. Of course, couldn't forget to tighten up those steering rack bolts, one on each side. So they are tightened up now, 56 Newton meters, using a tension wrench, and then using a long breaker bar or ratchet, you go another 90 degrees. So you tension them to 56 Newton meters. Make sure you got your spanner on top to make sure the nut on top doesn't turn, and tension them to 56. Then and then go 90 degrees. So easiest way to do that is put this on so it's 90 degrees to the subframe, and then turn it until it comes around in line with the subframe, 90 degrees. Go for a bit of a test drive with the top down, and yeah, there's a little bit more noise after fitting these downpipes, but it's not that much, and I'm just glad there's no real droning. If anything, maybe a slight drone around 2,000 to 2,500 RPM. And there's the cycles on the road. That 2,000 to 2,500 RPM range under low load, but normally the transmission kicks down a gear, so it's barely noticeable. Had a bit of a problem with the O2 sensors with one of the plugs not connected properly and contacts in there, so I'm going to spray a bit of contact cleaner in it, and that's on the O2 sensors. And I noticed that it came up that is through the MHD monitoring. I could see that the air fuel ratio on the B2 was very static, and so I tried to solve that, and everything's running fine now. So not a bad modification. Bum Dyno says that it's got more power, but most of it is noticeable just after the kickdowns, like in an overtaking move. You put your foot down, it kicks down, and you really feel that turbo spool up and the power come on. It seems a lot sooner, so I don't know how much extra power, but it just definitely seems a lot more responsive. Gives you all of that apparent sort of turbo lag. Makes it enjoyable to drive. And end of the test drive.